gentlemen.
Can I please have your attention? Can you dig it?
Greetings, dear listeners. This is Jonah Goldberg, host of the Remnant podcast, brought to you by the Dispatch and Dispatch Media. So these are trying times. These are complicated times. These are exciting times. There is dismaying times. They're the best of times. They're the worst of times. And at times like this, who is your safe harbor? Who is your port in a storm? When you are in dire need of recalibration and rank punditry, other than my friend and colleague twice over, Chris Stirewalt. Chris, welcome back to the Remnant.
It's the rankest, baby. It is the rankest.
I was just telling, you, that I caught this clip on the Twitters on. By the way, I am with John Podhoretz about this. I don't know where you come down. Maybe because you're a TV guy, you have to say X on TV for legal purposes. Mm-hmm. But Pod a couple weeks ago said on the commentary podcast, well, he said a lot of things, as you know. But one of the things he said was, we chastised our friend and colleague, Matt Continetti, by saying that he is just not going to call Twitter X. Calling Twitter X is like calling 6th Avenue Avenue of the Americas. I really like that analogy. All New Yorkers, like you this, if you're a tourist asking for directions and you ask where is blah 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 Avenue of the Americas, we know you're from out of town because everyone else calls it 6th Avenue.
I concur entirely. And the problem, Elon Musk wants to build a $100 billion. There's a version of it in China that he's trying to replicate. That is a one-stop shop for your social media, for every molecule of your digital presence, including all of your transactions. He wants to do that. And whatever, Elon Musk wants to do a lot of things. But X is a terrible name for the medium because X is also what we use to say blank, right? So you say, set it on X. X is is another substitute for something that isn't, that we don't want to identify. It's the same as blank.
A null
X
space.
Is a terrible name. Yeah, null space. Yeah. X is a terrible name. I say Twitter.
Also, phonically, it is what we say for things that used to exist, like my ex-boyfriend, my ex-girlfriend.
Yes.
That kind of thing.
It's a terrible name. So I say Twitter. Harumph.
I'm in favor of, and I actually tried to write this and then killed it because it wasn't interesting to anybody but me, that we should make Twitter the go-to term for all said platforms. Sort of like, in the South, if you order a Coke and they say, what kind? You say orange soda.
What kind? Yeah.
Or like Band-Aids are the term we use for all medicinal adhesives.
Kleenex, dumpster, etc.
Exactly. All right. But anyway, on Twitter, or the subgenre of Twitter, some call X, I saw a clip from The Daily Show where you make a brief appearance, and I was telling you this, and then I realized, oh crap, I forgot the line of work that we're in. I have to tell you that you come across fine. Because
right, always the first question when you're on satirical news, which is, was it bad? Was it about me?
Were they laughing with me or at me?
That's right.
And you're basically the pivot point where Jon Stewart is telling the story about Donald Trump talking about how he knows Willie Brown very well. Maybe Adam will play the clip for us for a second.
Because he's got inside information on Kamala Harris from someone she used to date.
Well, I know Willie Brown very well. In fact, I went down in a helicopter with him. We thought maybe this is the end. We were in a helicopter going to a certain location together. And it was an emergency landing. But he told me terrible things about her.
It seems that the African-American politician in question was not Kamala Harris's ex, former San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown, but rather this man, Nate Holden, a former Los Angeles City Council member who says he had a bumpy ride with Trump in 1990.
Anyway, so where he knows Willie Brown very, very well, former mayor of San Francisco. And it turns out, and he remembers talking to him about Kamala Harris, precisely because he had an emergency landing in a helicopter, and it was around this moment that Willie Brown told him Kamala Harris was bad news. And it turns out, and so you're brought on to say what? Right? Yeah, like you're brought on to say, no, actually it wasn't Willie Brown, it was this other gentleman, which is your name on the screen right here on our podcasting app, Nate Holden.
Nate Holden, LA City Council member, California State Senator.
Not Willie Brown.
Not Willie Brown. And I love this story because I love Willie Brown as a vanished figure from the American political landscape. Willie Brown, the rogue, the not entirely dissimilar to Marion Barry.
I think much smarter and more stylish, though.
Smarter and more stylish, though Marion Barry in his own way, other than his enthusiasm for rock cocaine, had a style of the moment in 80s and 90s DC. But he is this. He had a column in the San Francisco Chronicle for years. He's a fixture. He's a old time political boss, right? He's that guy. And Willie Brown, of course, had my favorite quote ever about Kamala Harris, which was when they found him, of course, in a pool hall to ask him whether it was, is it true? Is it true what they said about you and Kamala Harris? And he said, we had the perfect relationship. I loved me and she loved me. And I mean, how can you improve on a figure like that? So I was predisposed to like this story. And then, of course, Donald Trump tells a story that is pretty obviously untrue, right? Mm-hmm. When he's doing the press, it's pretty obviously untrue. And here's what's amazing to me about Donald Trump. Maggie Haberman, talking to Trump subsequently, is like, it doesn't seem like that's true. Willie Brown says that's not true. What does Donald Trump do? It is absolutely true. It is, how dare you accuse me of lying about this? It is absolutely, absolutely true. And then we get to the end, and Nate Holden says, it was me. And he said something to the effect of, I am the tall black man from Southern California, and he is the short black man from Northern California. But I guess we all look alike to him. And of course, Trump is left with one of two possibilities. The one, which is the typical response to Trump, is, what a racist. They all look alike to him. But it also points at something else, which is, who is the old man with memory problems in the presidential race? Right. Joe Biden took incoming deservedly, and not even enough, for fabricating stories, false recollections.
Willie Brown is stuff. Corn Pop.
Yeah, Willie Brown, exactly. And Willie Brown was touching the hairs on Joe Biden's legs as he was lifeguarding. And Republicans had a field day with all of this stuff. But it points to, not to make too much of it, but I like the story because inside of this one, it is both a mistaken recollection and a lie. The mistaken recollection is who it was. And the lie is that as this person was facing death, that they confessed to a real estate developer from New York about their ex-girlfriend, that the thing that they needed to say before they faced mortality was, you should know about this person you've never heard of. Right. And how she was not a good girlfriend. And if you unpack it, you get that part, but you also get the race part. So you get all of those things in one place. And I think it's a very nice little microcosm of the problems that Republicans are having right now.
Yeah, I just like the embellishment of, which is very Trumpy, and he says it about 1,000 things, but when he was talking about it, he says, I know Willie Brown very well.
Very well.
Very well.
Very well.
Well, I know Willie Brown very well.
And then to sort of slap down his ace in the hole. We were on a helicopter together. And then
I almost died with the guy. I almost died with this guy. How can you say I don't know Willie Brown very? I nearly died with this man. We have a bond for all time. Oh, not him. The story may be apocryphal, but of the Frank Lloyd Wright biographer who Frank Lloyd Wright was a wretch, a bad dude, and was famous for fabricating, embellishing stories. And he would be telling a story, and he would say, "And that's when I climbed Kilimanjaro." And somebody would say, "Well, Frank, that was actually me. I did that. You're stealing my story." Frank Lloyd Wright would say only, "Well, there you have it." And that's it. And there would be no, there's no follow up. There's no excuse. It's like, well, moving on.
All right. So moving on.
There you have it.
If you, let's just say you were on a widely listened to podcast by a pseudo-intellectual demi-Jew from the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and he asked you to summarize the state of the race, what would you say in said situation? Or if you were going down in a helicopter, either one.
If I was going down in a helicopter, I would think of girlfriends from 10 years ago. No, if I were going down on a helicopter, I would want you to know that the trajectory of the presidential race is such that Donald Trump and the Republicans will be down as much as they ever were to Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden at any point. I don't know that that's how this story concludes, but the bottom has fallen out. And the most important way to think about it is, for 2 years, 2/3 of voters told pollsters, isn't there someone else? Couldn't there be anyone else to run for president except for these two people? And now they have her. And they will overlook many deficiencies. They will overlook many, many things, because she has, you and I have talked many times about the problem of presidents who meet their mandate on day one.
Right.
If your mandate is only to not be the other person, it's too easy. And Kamala Harris has a too easy mandate right now, which is she is neither Donald Trump nor Joe Biden. She doesn't look like them. She doesn't sound like them. She is not the same gender. She is a totally different thing. And for, we used to use the term, remember, low information voters, LIVs, which was scrapped because it was pejorative.
And the Saudis wanted it for their golf league.
It's true. Exactly. Because they wanted us to be able to finally see the calves of professional golfers. Thank God. The low information voters have been replaced by misinformation voters on the edges, people who, what's the Reagan line? It's not that they're ignorant, it's that they know so much that isn't true.
Mm-hmm.
So we have these misinformation voters on the left and right, and they're not movable. You do not move them. And then you have, very understandably, 1/3 of the electorate or whatever that is low information voters in the best sense, which is they concluded that both parties are terrible. They didn't like either candidate. And they get their news. Where do they get their news? Where do they get their information? Whatever happens to filter through between Olympic coverage on the Today Show, whatever late night comics joke about, whatever seeps through on their Instagram, but they don't go looking for political coverage. It seeps into their world. And for the number of these that are likely voters, which is a large number, not as large as it is among the misinformed, but for the large number of them who are likely voters, they don't care. They don't care. Kamala Harris flip-flopped, Kamala Harris this, Kamala Harris that. Fine. Somebody new, great. Unless she's disqualified, we can do that.
Yeah, so I have my LA Times column about this. It'll be up on the Dispatch by the time this airs. Discussed this a couple times in the past, but every time I walk away from the mode of analysis that is now becoming a tiresome cliche called vibes, I am beclowned by reality, right? It's like, right. It was a vibes thing between Trump and Biden. Biden had worse vibes than Trump because strength and confidence beats vacillation and fragility. In the primaries, people were talking about, is Haley's position on, tax breaks for foreign companies in her state going to hurt her, blah, 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 blah. And I would be like, no, it's vibes, and Trump's sucking up all the vibes and it doesn't matter, whatever. Issues don't matter. people are like, oh my gosh, Trump is coming up with this new position on abortion. He's throwing the pro-life people under the bus. And all of us, we go, oh, this could matter. And then, nope, doesn't matter. Vibes, right? I'm now done. I'm T-Boone Pickens. I'm Slim Pickens. Sorry, Slim Pickens.
Both
very different Pickens. I'm Slim Pickens riding the ICBM all the way to the bottom now. And it's all about vibes. And I think that, and so the question I have is everybody, I just listened to Vivek Ramaswamy on NPR, which is
standby,
like the sixth seal. And everyone, all of our friends, all of our enemies, all of our acquaintances on the right, doesn't matter who they are, whether it's senators and congressmen or consultants or pundits, everyone is, or donors, everyone's saying, if Trump would just stick to the issues, from Ann Coulter to Ben Shapiro to every donor in donor world to Vivek Ramaswamy this morning, make this about policy, make it about policy, make it about policy. Rich Lowry, my friends at the National Review, all at National Review, there's no the, are saying the same thing. I'm not saying they're wrong insofar as that would definitely be better than what Trump is doing now.
Yes.
Right? So I agree with that entirely. Where I get off the bus with a lot of the voices saying this stuff, and I realize that some people are saying he'll definitely win if he does this to convince Trump to do it rather than actually believing it.
Right.
But some people actually believe he'll, whatever. Where I disagree is A, that Trump is capable of doing it, right? Waiting for Trump to act presidential and responsible is like expecting Godot to be punctual.
More presidential than Lincoln. More presidential than anyone. He could do it anytime he wants.
It's just like the dudes who say, I could have a girlfriend if I want to. I choose not to.
I'm focused on my anime right now.
And my manga comics. And and so one, I don't buy the idea that he can just flip that switch. But two, and more importantly, what if we are living in the universe that Trump and his defenders have created, which is to say, we spent 8 years where Trump took so many positions, made it impossible to defend him on a principled, consistent line. And people had to just sort of say, I have my faith and trust. I put my faith in him, or you just don't get it. And basically what they were doing was they were doing the groundwork for creating a vibes environment.
You got it.
And now you have Kamala Harris coming along, who I agree, according to Earth logic and the before times and the world I would like to live in, she would be considered too left-wing. Tim Walz would be considered too left-wing. Their past positions would hurt them. Their flip-flops would hurt them. I mean, I'd rather that they flip-flop away from the bad positions than not, but whatever. But I feel like I need to do my full Bill Murray and meatballs and just run around saying it just doesn't matter, because it just doesn't matter. It's like she's got better vibes than he does now, and that could change. Like, she could mess up an interview or something, but like this idea that somehow because you're right on the issues, you'll win an election. I don't know when that memo got distributed, because that's been wrong many times in the past. And I think it's wronger in the age of Trump.
It's always vibes. It's always vibes. Why did George W. Bush beat John Kerry?
Because John Kerry's a human toothache?
Yeah, vibes. It was the way that Barack Obama beat John McCain. On the issues, John McCain aligned better. If we were going to do public opinion research on where do Americans stand on these issues, Americans could honestly align with the Republican candidate and still vote for the Democrat. Every time it is vibes. The most important question, and again, 85, 90% of the vote is already banked. We already know it.
Right.
We know how 85, 90%, we can go county by county in these United States, and we could get pretty close in 90% of the counties to what the final percentages were going to be, because we know. And then it's 10%, 15% of persuadables at the end who move. What do they have in common? They don't care about politics that much. Some of them do. There are the genuinely conflicted conservatives who are wrestling with whether or not to vote for Kamala Harris because they want to banish Trump. There are a small number of these people, but most of these people are undecided precisely because politics and policy is just not that important to them. The most important question in every election, we we've talked about vibes. We've talked about who do you want to have a beer with. We've said it many ways and many times over the past 50 years. But what it comes down to, the question I like on this that I think captures it well is cares about people like me.
Mm-hmm.
Cares about people like me. And there's a new Ipsos poll out that has Kamala Harris clearly ahead on the question of cares about people like me. Joe Biden won that question. Donald Trump won that question against Hillary Clinton. Barack Obama won that question. Cares about people like me is the way that voters say, yeah, I don't know. I don't know, but he or she seems like they're a good person and they care about me. They're going to make decisions with me in mind. And that's about as good as it gets, right? That's about as good as it gets in politics. I agree with you entirely on the matter of it would be far better for Republicans if Donald Trump developed a disciplined, it worked for Donald Trump in 2016. I will not rehearse here my unpopular but very right opinion that the Access Hollywood tape made Donald Trump president because it so exploded.
It scared him straight.
Yeah, it's so exploded. He's like the children of Israel. He only becomes willing to listen when he's in deep, deep trouble and melts down the golden calf. And for Trump, being told that when Kellyanne Conway told him in 2016, your name will be a joke. Your family name will be worthless. You'll be the next Dukakis. You'll be a punchline. Trump got on the teleprompter. And in those days, Newt Gingrich and Rudy Giuliani were considered the mandarins, the sages of the Trump wing of the Republican Party. And they got him he got religion. And it helped him that he talked about judges and he talked about tax cuts and he talked about regulation. He talked about things that Republican voters like, and he got the base back together. But the way that he won was that plus by not acting like a lunatic every day, and James Comey very obligingly putting Anthony Weiner's laptop on the front page of every website and newspaper in America 6 days before the election. He got away with it. So it'd be way better for Trump if Donald Trump only talked about capybaras being the largest rodent in the world and he became focused on capybaras. That would be better than what he's doing, right? Mm-hmm. It would be better if it was about policy, and it would be better if it was about policy that was popular. But if it was only capybaras and his love for them, that would still be better than making up stories about Kamala Harris's ex-boyfriends and doing a dive into the intersectionality of South Asian and Jamaican ancestry. It would be better than all of the dumb stuff that he's doing that he does to soothe himself.
Could he still attack Brian Kemp? I mean, give him something.
only on the basis that it is illegal, I believe, in Georgia to own a capybara. He could come after him on Georgia's restrictive exotic pet laws.
All right, so I've heard this from several smart people that I respect. This it's always been vibes thing, and I agree. It's always the who'd you rather have a beer thing has always been hugely important, And I spent a lot of time writing about Mitt Romney's authentic and authenticity problem, in that he seemed fake, but that's actually him. And
hot dog is my favorite meat.
Yeah, and I want to be clear about that just because I know people in Romney world listen to this podcast. I think Mitt Romney is an entirely honorable human being. He just comes across as too good to be real kind of thing. Right. And that there's an uncanny valley problem, but he's actually incredibly decent.
Yeah, and history has borne that out, that he has
sweet,
character.
Smart man. Yeah. But it feels to me like, well, I concede the point. At the same time, it feels to me like issues, policy positions, records, character, those things mattered more at the very least as vibe shaping tools.
Yes, 100%.
And I feel like that's what's missing now.
What was in 2004, the Bush campaign did a jaw-dropping thing. They, in March, I think, ran an attack ad on John Kerry, who had just gotten the Democratic nomination under him. And you remember the ad. It was John Kerry windsurfing. John Kerry's a flip-flopper. John Kerry is a hollow, empty person, and he lacks character. The windsurfing ad was Karl Rove's masterstroke of like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're defining this guy. We're going negative early, or the earliest for an incumbent president, certainly. And they went negative. When the Swift boat attacks came on later, they were building on the same narrative, which is he's a phony. This guy is a phony baloney. His name is fake. He's fake. He's a pretend Kennedy. He didn't spend Christmas in Cambodia. He's a phony. And that affects the vibes, right? For Republicans now, the genius that, I'm obsessed with the movie The Invention of Lying with Ricky Gervais, which is a boring commentary on religion, but a great commentary on human nature, in which no one has ever lied before. He tries it, and guess what? It works. It works really, really, really well. And then, of course, what he finds out is, oh, this is why we actually discourage lying. The reason that we discourage lying, because he suffers all the consequences. Republicans found one weird trick, which is nothing matters. Character doesn't matter. Flip-flops don't matter. Nothing matters. Vibes matter. The feeling matters. That's what counts. Listening to Republicans criticize Kamala Harris for flip-flopping. Donald Trump can't keep the same position on abortion for one continuous press conference. He cannot stay on one message for an hour, let alone a day or a week. What does Donald Trump believe about abortion? Depends on who he's talking to. What does Donald Trump believe on a host of issues? Depends on the audience. Republicans said, this is what Democrats have been doing to us all the time. And now we're doing it back to them. We're going to do it back to them. There's a little truth in that, right? Republicans' obsession with media coverage leads them into some very weird corners. And this one was, the Democrats have been getting a free pass all of this time for doing things that we say are bad. Now we've flipped the script on them. Listening to them caterwaul about how Kamala Harris is flip-flopping, or how Kamala Harris doesn't have clear positions, or all of this stuff, is a joke, because they gave that away. They gave away their inheritance, and their inheritance was, we used to have the mommy party and the daddy party, and the Republican brand was, you're not always going to like what I have to tell you, but it's for your own good. Mitt Romney was the ultimate expression of the Republicans as the daddy party, right? We're going to have to cut entitlements. We're going to have to do difficult things, but it's going to be good for you, and you're going to be glad you did. And Republicans said, we don't want to do that anymore. We want to tell people what they want to hear. We want to flip-flop. We want to hold our positions loosely. And Democrats are doing it to them, and they're complaining about it. Well, tough toenails. That's like that's why you don't do that. You don't do that so that when you want to call somebody a flip-flopper, when you want to say that somebody's short on substance, when you want to do those things, that it works.
So it's serendipitous. Is serendipity always good, or is serendipity like coincidence? It's just fortuitous. It's just like I think it's confluence. Your listeners will correct me. I'm confident, but I feel like serendipity is a positive coincidence. Yep, you're right. Happy or beneficial way. There we go. Okay. So it's perhaps serendipitous. It is perhaps cursed that you bring up the mommy daddy thing, because I floated, we had the great and talented Megan McArdle on the Dispatch podcast last week.
I was on with her, brother.
That was 2 weeks ago when you were on, right?
Yeah.
So, but last week we had her on, and for whatever reason you weren't there.
She's
awesome.
Best.
She really should work at the Dispatch. Don't you think they're just sort of mission aligned there?
It's a crime that she doesn't, and you should remedy that immediately. You should use your massive powers.
I stand outside of her house holding up a boombox all the time with the Dispatch logo on it. But anyway,
playing Hayek tracks.
We got into this riff where I now I really feel like I got to write it down before it gets out there because I'm getting a lot of feedback about it. Mommy Daddy Party starts 1991. Chris Matthews writes this thing about it. I actually think he did it as part of a symposium for the New Republic and then did it as an op-ed. It doesn't matter. It was the last really memorable contribution to psephology that Chris Matthews made. And he basically made this case that there's a mommy party and daddy party. The mommy party, the Democrats, they care about nurturing, they care about support, they care about kids and education, mommy type issues. Dad is the guy who goes around at the end of the night and turns off make sure that all the lights are off and all the doors are locked, cares about security and protection. And the country goes back and forth between wanting a mommy party in charge or a daddy party in charge. I made the case on the fly last week that the way to think about it is, look, culture, we all like to talk about how politics is downstream of culture, but we don't actually think it through sufficiently. And it turns out, I posited, you'll get your chance to dilate on this as much as you like in a second. I posited that the model of the mommy and daddy party thing worked on the premise where America was defined by intact marriages. And so mommy and daddy actually love each other and they're part of a communal enterprise. And they may argue and they may fight and they may have different priorities, but they are still on the same team, as it were, which is what mommies and daddies are in intact families. We now live in a society where the Republican Party is basically the divorced dad. And I don't mean this aimed at you. You're a wonderful dad and all that kind of stuff. But the stereotypical divorced dad of a certain type who's there for the big gesture, but doesn't ever want to be the bad guy, right? Never wants to tell the kids they're doing anything wrong unless it's like this very extreme moment kind of thing where the mom is just completely flipped out and dad's got to rush in and crack some skulls. But other than that, dad just wants to come in with the brand new bike that pisses off the mom, right? Because the mom is like, we're trying to live on a budget here. And here you guys come in with these big gestures and the big thing. And then you go off and leave and I have to run all those kids. And the mom is the bitter divorced mom who cares more about punish, and this is where Megan chimed in on a lot of this stuff, because you hear these stories about a lot of divorces where people actually will hurt their own financial, a lot of women, bitter women in divorces, which are not all women in divorces, but will hurt their own kids or their own prospects or their own financial bottom line just to see their ex-husband who went out on them with some, younger thing, traded them in for a trophy wife. They'd rather everyone be worse off if it pisses off him more. And so you get this kind of trolling war dynamic because you can't get people to it. So it's not civil war. It's family divorce that is the better paradigm on this. So they're not going to kill each other, right? Very few people are going to pick up guns. If even 0.001% of people pick up guns and start shooting people they disagree with, that would be terrible. But that's far more likely than the secession civil war crap, right? But you now have, it's much more of a women are from Venus, men are from Mars, but through a divorce kind of thing that explains the bitterness and the nastiness of our politics. What say you?
I enjoyed watching you carry that analogy like a Fabergé egg through a minefield that you unclothed were walking through the no man's land of a World War I battlefield. Yes, I agree. And I think it was David French who wrote the concept of American divorce. And you don't get civil war, but what you get is this lasting acrimony. A very good friend of mine told me when I got divorced, he is a divorced dad also. He said, what he told his wife at the time, ex-wife at the time, was, we are not going to be married forever. It is true, but we are going to be divorced forever. So we should get good at it. We should learn to be good at being divorced. And that's hard. And the central lie that breaks our politics is that total victory is possible.
Right.
at the core of what ails us, there are lots of things that we could talk about that would help improve that. But at the core of what ails us is the false belief that somehow there is some magic that we can use that will cause the other people either to all change their minds or give us total power, give us total control, as opposed to the truth, which is that a republic is like a family in only one way that I can think of. It exists because we say it exists. It is true because we say it is true. Everybody has relations that they are not close with. And then they have other relations that they're very close with. Power of family in our age, right? So this is not a time when you were stuck with these people to stay alive. But the power of family in our age is the power that we impart to it. And the same is true of a republic. If it's going to work, it works because we say that it is so. And the overwhelming majority of Americans say that it is so. But we come back to the misinformation voters on both sides who strongly believe things that are not true. And one of the things that they believe is that total victory is possible. The sad story of Tim Walz. So here's a guy who starts out, and he is what we used to think of as a Rahm Emanuel kind of Democrat. When Rahm Emanuel was running the DCCC, he said, we're going to recruit moderate to conservative candidates in moderate to conservative districts, and we're going to win. And he enforced that discipline on the Democratic Party that didn't want it. And he was right. And people like Kristen Gillibrand, RIP, in upstate New York and so on and so around the country. And basically, we got to bring the blue dog kinds of Democrats back. Tim Walz went from a A-rated NRA moderate Democrat from a swingy to Republican district in Minnesota. He gets elected governor of Minnesota, and he reaches what seems to be a logical conclusion. Man, we have enough Democrats in Minnesota that if I keep them fired up and turned out, I don't need to worry about the Republicans in Minnesota. Minnesota is not a very Democratic state, but it is a consistently Democratic state. Minnesota is about as Democrat as Texas is Republican, which is to say, not very, but durable. 5 points and they stay. Walz concludes, okay, I'm going to give everybody everything that they want. And he passed a jaw-dropping kind of budget and package, and he rammed it through the state legislature and became a hero to Keith Ellison and all of these people who said, look at this guy. He learned that you don't have to suck up to persuadable voters. You get a majority and then you cram it down. What's the line? We're going to give it to him good and hard. Who said that? With democracy, it's Mencken. Democracy is determining what the people want and then giving it to them good and hard.
That's right.
And so that's what Tim Walz did.
I kept thinking of "You'll Get Nothing and Like It," which is
You'll Get
Judge
Nothing
Smales
and Like
and Caddyshack. But anyway,
but same. Walz also had developed a persona over the years of what? A nice man. What a nice man. And I'm sure he is a nice man. And he built great relationships when he was in Congress and won the admiration of moderate Democrats and Republicans and did really, really well. How did he become the vice presidential candidate? Not just by flipping to the left to be a real Minnesota progressive in the purest sense, but also by becoming mean. He became jerky, right? JD Vance's couch. I read the piece, and I think it was the Associated Press, but it was in a bunch of places about how Walz's his mimetic warfare, his development of the dankest meme of weird was at the center of his elevation. That he called JD Vance and Donald Trump weird, and this put it over the top. And I thought, ugh. And then he had the couch joke about the made up funny internet meme about JD Vance in his sectional phase. And
How do you spell sectional? Sorry, go on.
Quiet, Sam. And Tim Walz became a hero to Democrats for becoming more radical and becoming a troll. And guess what? It doesn't work. It's not pleasant. It isn't good. And now that they're bailing out Walz, so JD Vance's accusation of stolen valor seems wrong. I don't think it's stolen valor, but Walz certainly seems to have elided, right?
Mm-hmm.
When Nancy Pelosi congratulated him or thanked him for his service in war, he didn't say, well, I've got to correct you there. That's one where I should correct you. Thank you. But, I didn't see combat or whatever. And he, not in a Richard Blumenthalian way.
Or a Kerry-esque way, right?
Or a Kerry-esque way. Kerry's a more complicated case because he definitely got wounded. He definitely saw combat.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't trying to say that Kerry was stolen valor per se. I was just saying that he made his military service the centerpiece of his persona. Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say, is that Tim Walz had made being a veteran, 24 years in the Minnesota National Guard, a core piece of his identity. And he fudged, right? The rank, he didn't actually retire with the rank, And now JD Vance finds his place in the Trump campaign. And his place in the Trump campaign is the Spiro Agnew, the relentless attack dog. I'm unpopular. Guess what? It can't get much worse from here. The problem with going negative, it drives up their negatives, but it drives up your negatives too. Well, guess what? There's nothing much more that JD Vance could do to drive up his negatives. He is a junk car now. So what do you do with the junk car? You put it in the demolition derby, and he's out to do it. So Tim Walz tells the arc of his career points to exactly the phenomenon that you describe, which is he goes from a moderate who has a big heart and open to Republicans and can be friends with Republicans to this guy.
So a couple of quick things. First of all, I want to get back to this, what you're talking about, but I've been meaning, you know how, not you, because you've always been even-keeled and perspicacious and prudent in all of your punditry over the years. But some of us have felt in the Trump era that it is necessary to go back and check your receipts about what you thought about things. So like, I misjudged the birthers thing.
Yeah, I did.
I never bought into it, but I also never thought it was that big a deal. I was wrong about that, right? There were a few other things about race that I probably downplayed. I was probably too much of a lagging rather than a leading indicator on some of the gay marriage stuff. But we can get into all that. I've just noticed a lot lately that a lot of people sort of, like, I will defend bringing up Willie Horton in 1988. I think it was a legitimate thing to bring up.
He did it. Michael Dukakis actually did that.
Doesn't mean that every third party ad or whatever was great, but like I think it was a legitimate issue. I wasn't way out in front or anything on the Swift boat stuff, but I subscribed to certainly its broad outlines. But you hear people today often bring up the Swift boat stuff as if it is as illegitimate as the Willie Horton thing and all that. And I'm just kind of curious, do I need to revisit this, or what is your take on the Swift boat period?
John Kerry. Do you remember what John Kerry said when he came out to accept the Democratic nomination in 2004?
John Kerry reporting for duty. Yeah, I remember.
Yep.
Yeah.
He snapped a salute and he said reporting for duty. The premise of the Democratic campaign was that George W. Bush was a draft dodging chicken hawk who didn't even show up for the Texas Air National Guard. John Kerry bravely volunteered to go serve. The Winter Soldier versus the Springtime Patriot, and that John Kerry was going to get the United States out of Iraq because he had the experience and the scars to show that he understood the cost of war. And this, of course, gave every boomer, progressive, and Democrat the tingles, because it was going to be the ultimate validation of the Vietnam anti-war movement that had cost the Democrats so terribly, right? The consequences in the Democratic Party of the Vietnam War movement, anti-Vietnam War movement, were 3 of the biggest landslides in Republican electoral history, right? They broke their party on this issue. But John Kerry was going to vindicate them, and he was going to come back and he was going to make it right again. The bill would finally come due. So he makes this the centerpiece. Now, how about Christmas in Cambodia? John Kerry made up pretty clearly. And at the time, the Kerry campaign said he was very close to Cambodia many times. He was very close to, I was actually reading this yesterday for my column to say, like, okay, what did John Kerry say? What didn't he say? He was fudgy. He was definitely fudgy. And much like Walz today, there were people in his units who were happy to come forward and say that they thought that John Kerry was, and I would further say the thing about John Kerry, when he thought it would be a positive in his career and his life as a young man to be like his idol JFK, right? The PT 109, his swift boat would be his PT 109. And as public sentiment turned against war, and I don't disagree in any way that John Kerry had a change of heart about the war and that being there changed the way that he felt about it. But to that windsurfing ad, he was open to the idea that someone who had been hungry for glory on the battlefield betrayed the trust and confidence of his comrades when he threw his medals away, when he did the Winter Soldier report, when he said that what was the most damning line in those attacks? It wasn't that he was fudging his record. Do you remember? It was that he accused American troops in Vietnam of atrocities not unlike Genghis Khan.
I was going to say it was the pronunciation of Genghis that offended me the most. Yeah.
Genghis Khan. And that this guy testifying in front of the Senate, I think, lobbed these allegations, untrue allegations, based on what we would later find out to be a bogus Winter Soldier report. So that was the part wasn't the fudging as much as it was that when it was in his interest to be an enthusiast for the Vietnam War, he was for the Vietnam War. When it was in his perceived interest, people flip-flop. We become suspicious of people whose flips and flops always flip and flop in the direction that is good for them. People mature, they change their minds, but you're looking for occasionally someone to flop against interest, right? You're looking for occasionally someone to say, well, I'm going to say this thing and I know it's not going to help me and it's not going to be popular, but I'm going to do it.
So, but like that's the case I would basically make, the one that you just made. I feel like there is this belief that there was I just got to go back and look it up, but like that some central accusation of the Swift boaters was untrue and having to do with his rendition of his actual service and all that. But
I'm sure we could go through those ads and we could hear from, and I can't remember the name of the guy who was the chief prosecutor, his former comrade, the chief prosecutor. We could probably find claims that they're making about the claims that Kerry was making that are wrong, no doubt. But the core of it is the Cambodian Christmas, right? At the core, aside from the vibes around his Vietnam veterans against the wartime, the core is, I remember Christmas in Cambodia. And it was not him. He was not there.
Okay. Yeah. I just, throwing away your medals and then coming in as Cincinnatus laying down the plow is problematic.
And the Tim Walz problem is that the way to invoke John Podhoretz yet again, something that I have stolen.
You do it
from
three
John.
times, you know what happens.
I know, exactly. Exactly. The John's point of Tim Walz is a progressive's idea of a conservative, right? He is a Sorkonian version of like, well, what could you say about Tim Walz? He's a football coach. He served in the military for 24 years. These are the people that you're supposed to like. You better like this guy. And the idea that, look, running mates, the most important thing that running mates are billboards for the campaign to project onto what they're about and what they're trying to say at that moment. And the first job is to unite the party. Tim Walz did that in a way that JD Vance did not. Donald Trump missed an opportunity with his pick to unite Republicans and offer them somebody to say, okay, he cares about us. He's listening. He's paying attention. We like this. Instead, he chose somebody radical, and he chose somebody who was more MAGA even than he. Walz passed the first post, right? He did that. He united the Democrats. They like him. That's good. But on the next question of what is Kamala Harris telling the general electorate about who she is, she wanted a Biden.
Right.
Which allowed Barack Obama to say, I am cool with white dudes. I am fine with you people. You guys are okay. You don't bother me. I'll hang out with you. Remember when Obama called Joe Biden Sheriff Joe? Sheriff Joe's going to get you. Like, ah. And it was a way to say, I'm totally comfortable with you people, and you can feel comfortable voting with me because I do care about you. On that test, I don't know when Kamala Harris is going to do an interview. I do not believe, as I wrote for today, that any persuadable voter cares. I do not believe that there is a persuadable voter that says, oh, it has been 27 days since she gave. Well, see, that was just a gaggle. You can't give a gaggle. It has to be a press conference with it. And I don't think anybody cares. I think we care because it's our job to care. And she should give one, and she's wrong to not give one. But I don't think persuadable voters care. I think Tim Walz is going to have to do an interview, right? I think Tim Walz is going to, because JD Vance went out. The gift of JD Vance, he would eat a glass Coke bottle to be in power. He would do as he has demonstrated over and over. You tell me what I need to do to get there. And JD Vance went out and he did the big 3 network Sunday shows. And he swung a club at Tim Walz the whole time. Tim Walz is going to have to do an interview now and say, okay, so this is where I was wrong. And he might be able to do it. He might be able to tell a story that is compelling and believable that will tamp it down. But he's going to have to do an interview with somebody. And the time that you have to do an interview is when you need the story to change. And Tim Walz needs the story to change.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. I'm with you, though, like on this. First of all, it is August 13th. The number of people paying attention to politics that haven't decided how they're going to vote is very low. The best example of, like, it's very easy because we've grown up paying attention to watching when the liberal left, center left, the mainstream media gets itself into a bubble about stuff. It's very easy to see. It's sometimes more interesting to see where the bubble is on the right. That sounds, whatever. And so, like, the idea, the Trump team is trying really, really hard to make this case that it's unfair that Biden got off the ticket.
So unfair.
And I'm waiting for John Eastman or somebody to explain to me how it was unconstitutional, but that's a different matter, which Trump keeps saying. But the polling that came out immediately after the ticket switch said that something like 86% of Republicans thought it was good that Biden wasn't going to run again.
Yeah, because it's good.
Because it's good, right? And so,
it's good.
So my point is, though, that this, it's unfair that they switched, that, that the Stephen and Jason Miller, the Laurel and Hardy of MAGA, were, pounding their spoons on their high chairs about.
That's very good.
They, which one's which. Anyways, but
there's another fine mess you've gotten me into, Jonah.
Trying to make fetch happen on Fox, screaming about how unfair and how outrageous this is and how 14 million votes were denied, when 4 out of 5 plus of their own voters thought it was a good thing. It's like people don't care about the Biden, the unfairness of the Biden thing. And the question I have, though, getting back to Walz and this stuff, I agree he should do an interview. I agree what he did sounds pretty sketch. I agree it doesn't sound like stolen valor to me. It does sound like stolen credit taking, political game playing that you shouldn't have done. And the question I have is on the vibe level, getting back to where we began this conversation.
Right.
Donald Trump can't tell you which foot he had bone spurs in that got him the medical deferment from Vietnam. Donald Trump said that avoiding getting the clap in the 1970s was his personal Vietnam, which is a funny joke. And I think he was.
I was going to say a very funny line.
It was a funny joke, and he said it on Howard Stern. So I give him a little bit of a pass on that, right? But he did avoid the draft at a time when that was problematic. Yes. And
5 deferments or whatever. Yeah.
And I'm one of these people who flatly believes John Kelly about the stuff about suckers and losers in the cemeteries in northern France, right? There's no plausible case that Kelly made that up, or that we should defer to the guy who misremembered Willie Brown on the helicopter as, his version of events has to be true. It seems to me that Walz is more than capable enough. If all we're dealing with is the sort of fast and loose world of asked and answered counselor, by the way, what about Trump who did blah, 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 blah. It feels to me, not on the substance, not on the merits, because we don't live in that world. I want to live in that world. I'm not, people think I'm celebrating the fact it's all about vibes. I am not. But it does seem to me that that's not that heavy a lift for a halfway decent folksy politician to sort of spin it around and make it, really, you're going to make this the reason not to vote for Kamala Harris is the person on the top of the other ticket, blah, 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 fill in the blank. No?
Tim Walz will probably matter less than JD Vance. In the end, he will probably matter less than JD Vance. So if I were a Democrat, I would say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do an interview. It's going to be tough. It's going to be wrenching, but we're going to get it done before Tuesday of next week. We're going to do it. It's going to be unpleasant, and we're going to finish it. So that by the time he takes the stage in Chicago and is there, that we're already at asked and answered, and that it's not pleasant, but it is superior. And to allow the convention. So here's the way the calendar has worked this year. Donald Trump is nearly killed 2 days before the Republican convention is about to begin. Into as you say, for persuadable voters, for most Americans, they weren't paying attention to politics. That story broke through in this huge way. And so all of a sudden people are like, whoa, what's going on? And then the Republicans have their convention, and it's mostly okay, right? It's weird for sure. It's for sure in many occasions. And they reinforce their message. Their billboard says, we are the He-Man Woman Haters Club. And if you are sick and tired of cat ladies, and if you are sick and tired of a woke, feminized world, we are here. Hulk Hogan is ripping his shirt off. Dana White is here. We are JD Vance. This is us. And so they leave this lasting impression with voters that lasts for about 36 hours or whatever it was. And Joe Biden pulls the ripcord, jumps out of the plane. Democrats get the biggest political news story in 50 years. The biggest political news story since Richard Nixon resigned is what? The sitting president is abandoning his presidential campaign, and his vice president is ascending. Whoa, unbelievable. This huge story comes in. And then what happens next? Paris Olympic Games. And in all of the news space, all of the oxygen gets sucked up. And Kamala Harris takes the opportunity to do what? Vibe. She takes the opportunity while the public attention is consumed with the Olympics, takes the opportunity to go vibe and go do rallies, go around the country and go do whatever. And now they're holding, because the convention, and Biden's going to speak on the first day of the convention, and talk about a tough one, right? Talk about that. You know who you put on the first day of your convention? The thing that you kind of want to get over with. So that's the maximum distance between that person and the presidential nominee who speaks on Thursday. And Joe Biden's going to come out and he'll get through it however best he can. And then Democrats will launch out from there. If we're still talking about Tim Walz a week from Friday, if that's still what about Tim Walz, that's a huge problem for Democrats. They have to address it because they need the good dismount. They need to go in clean because from the time that the convention ends, they're going to be 2 or 3 weeks away from the debate. And they cannot have the 2 or 3 weeks prior to the debate be marred by Tim Walz. So Tim Walz needs to basically take one for the team, have a bad outing, and get to asked and answered.
All right, so quickly, let's do some basic pre-convention. I'm not saying I won't have you on again before the convention, but odds are iffy.
You never know. Somebody better may cancel.
When does early voting begin and where?
So September, ballots start getting printed and ballots close middle of September, 11, 12, 13 of September. Early voting will start 6. I should know off the top of my head, but the rules have changed and changed back. But basically late September, let's say September 20 for whatever purposes, but let's say the 3rd or 4th week of September, early voting will begin.
Has the Harris ticket put Arizona and Georgia and North Carolina back into competitive field or not?
She's winning Arizona. North Carolina. So the way that
you mean currently, not necessarily.
Currently.
You're not making a prediction.
Yeah. I'm calling it now.
You have a history of doing that, calling Arizona early.
I know. That's where I'm at. It wasn't early.
I know.
The way that the Biden coalition is about as good with black voters as Democrats typically were.
The Harris coalition.
No. The Biden coalition was.
Okay. Yeah.
In the winning Biden coalition in 2020.
I see. Okay.
Joe Biden did about as well or a little better with non-white voters, and that's not a really useful term, but you'll see where I'm going with it. About as well as Democrats other than Barack Obama, right? Did maybe a little better than Bill Clinton. Did pretty well with that part. The way that he won, primarily though, 70 to 72%, 73% at the high end of the electorate's white. And Joe Biden beat Donald Trump because he did better with white voters, white men, white women, non-college, college, across the board than Hillary Clinton had 4 years before. The promise that Democrats see in Kamala Harris is that she could do both. Right? That she could have Obama-level turnout and enthusiasm with non-white voters, which Donald Trump helped her enormously with by welcoming her to the race, by questioning her blackness, which is the certified, guaranteed way to make Black America say, oh no, she's Black. She is for sure Black, and you shut up about it. The getting Obama levels of turnout and vote share with Black voters, and then doing as well as Biden did with white voters. The second part is the question. But if she were to do that, she would win Arizona. She would win Georgia. She would win North Carolina. And what's tantalizing Democrats right now is the possibility that she could win the biggest electoral college victory since 2008. But we have not gotten to the circus yet. Right. The circus doesn't really start till that debate. We haven't really gotten to the place where the vibe changes happen fast, where and you are called upon constantly to make a crucial choice, which is, are we engaging on this, or are we going to try to ride it out? Are we going to participate in this question, or are we going to answer these claims, or are we going to try to just push through? And we don't know. And we don't know how that goes. But look for states. North Carolina has a smaller black population than Georgia, but it has a substantial black population. And it's got lots of, if any place where you look and you see lots of college educated suburbanites and you see a black population in the double digits, that's a place where Democrats have the potential to do really, really well.
So,
and Arizona, by the way, just to Arizona, the Republican Party's profound weirdness, the Republican Party's Carrie Lakeitude, the audits of the election results. There was a story in the Washington Post that I read with real interest about school districts in Arizona saying, we will no longer host elections here. Mm-hmm. Too many death threats, too much weirdness, too much possibility for violence, people walking into polling places with cameras on, wearing their GoPros to record the election stealing and all that stuff. Blake Masters, Carrie, it's been too much. It's the Republicans in Arizona have just been too much. And Donald Trump certainly could win Arizona, but the trajectory right now is, and I'll shut up by saying the race when Joe Biden was in was Democrats right off the Sun Belt and then fight like hell to win all three of the northern states. They got to win Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin to hold the line, and that's it. And it's all the chips in there. Now it's reversed. The Republicans are going to have to defend Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina, and then hope to get lucky again. A phrase of yours that I have borrowed many times, which is pick the lock of the Electoral College. The way that Republicans win now is that they find a fluke. They just need it. You need to, what was the Trump line? I need you to find me 40,000 votes.
11,500 and whatever.
11,511 votes. They just need to find 11,500 and whatever votes in one of they need to hold the line in the Sun Belt and then find a way like they did in 2016 to get over the top in at least one of those states up there. And then he could win. Yeah.
I saw Ron Brownstein on CNN the other day. I like Ron Brownstein. He's a very smart guy, right? Mm-hmm. So this is not necessarily about him, but there is this thing pundits get where every now and then you say something memorable that kind of gets into the zeitgeist, and then and then when it gets bastardized or overtaken or improved upon or whatever, you get really defensive and try to protect it. Now I think of Tim Russert with his stupid friggin' grease board and Florida, and that kind of thing. Ron Brownstein was making the case that he invented the phrase, the blue wall, the Democrats' blue wall.
Okay.
And he defined it as these 18, I think, states that had consistently voted Democrat from 90 something to whenever something.
From a cephalological point of view, the blue wall are the states that voted Democratic 92, 96, 2000, 2004, 2008, 2012. That's the blue wall.
And he was lamenting that now the blue wall has come to mean Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And he was like, no. Those are the three blue wall states that Trump took. But the blue wall is this other thing and blah, blah, blah. And it got really complicated really quickly. And I was just like, dude, you're just gonna have to let it go. Like the shelf life on these things is not forever.
Ron Brownstein is going to build a big, beautiful wall, and he's going to make Canada pay for it.
And okay, final question. I'll let you go. There was a lot of commentary and punditry prior to Biden's withdrawal, with many people providing the proper caveat that the election is not going to be held today. But if the election were held today, right? The question was, if the election were held today, who wins? There was a certain frisson of transgressiveness and boldness that ran through a lot of conservative punditry by saying Trump's going to win. And they really enjoyed making that point that Trump was ahead of Biden and all these things hadn't worked and the criminal trials hadn't worked and yada, yada, yada. I don't hear a lot of if the election were held today talk these days, which is fine by me because I think it's a dumb thing to a certain extent. Lots going to happen between now and then. But just for balance, just to be fair and balanced, if the election were held today, who wins?
Oh, Kamala Harris. That's that one's easy. And I think about it as probabilities or chances. And I would have given Biden a 1 in 5 chance of winning the presidential election when he was still in the race by the end, which is about the same chance that Donald Trump had to win in 2016. Mm-hmm. You need a lot of stuff to go your way, right? And it would have been a closer election than the polls were saying, because as we saw, there were a bunch of Democrats who were saying that they were undecided, or a bunch of Democrats who said they were going to vote for Robert F. Kennedy Jr., or there were a bunch of Democrats who said they didn't know, who, as soon as Biden was off, said, great, that's all we wanted. That's all we were looking for. We were just looking to get. So the Democrats immediately got back they got their voters all back. And most of them would have come in anyway. So the final election, the belief that, what did they say, that Trump is a man of destiny, a Napoleonic figure that history had anointed, and that the assassination attempt, and that he was going to march through the world on his way to yes, lots of truth in it based on the state of the election at the time, but it would have closed, right? Those allegedly undecided voters weren't going to Trump. And what we saw with Trump over and over and over again, Biden goes down, Trump doesn't go up, right? Mm-hmm. Trump had the Hillary Clinton problem, which is no matter what was happening to her opponent, Hillary Clinton, in 2016, her numbers never went up. Joe Biden melted down and was being hounded out of the race by his own party, and Donald Trump couldn't break 50. And the race would have closed and Biden would have had a shot at winning. Now it's reversed. I'll give Trump a 2 in 5 chance of winning. His position is better than it was than Biden's was. It's not as good as it was in 2020 in a lot of ways, right? Because he's a different candidate and the electorate is in a different place. But the odds are clear that Kamala Harris has Democrats. I'll shut up by saying this. If Republicans had been able to do what Democrats did and replace their unpopular elderly nominee at the top of the ticket, the Republicans would be riding vibes all the way, right? For sure. It would be
generic Republican is the most popular candidate in America.
It'd be a great situation for them. But Republicans have made a decision, and there are many, as George W. Bush would say, decision points along the way. But the one that always stands out is the decision by Senate Republicans to keep Donald Trump when he was impeached for sending a mob to the Capitol. And the decision was, it's better to make the best of a bad situation than it is to pay the price of trying to remedy it. Democrats made a decision, and we could talk about all the ways that Trump and Biden are different, and that there are no Biden Democrats. He doesn't have some base in the party. The penalty for unhorsing Biden was lower, but Democrats demonstrate that persuadable voters respond when parties respond. And it would have been nice if Democrats had a more orderly process and that they had done it at a convention and done it all that stuff. But the party did decide, and they made a choice in rational self-interest, and voters have responded.
And we should just say, for people out there who say totally plausibly, totally understandably, totally logically, why don't the Republicans get rid of their candidate? The Republicans, just as a factual matter, getting rid of your nominee before he's the official nominee is so much easier than getting rid of your nominee after they're the nominee. Like, there are all sorts of state election laws. I mean, talk to Sarah and David about it. It's like everything locks in. It's almost impossible to get them off ballots. It's possible to get the money out of their treasury, their campaign treasuries. It's just, I think it was Weigel who had this tweet a while back where he said, for all those who poo-pooed our use of presumptive nominee,
yeah, there you go.
This shows why we do it, something like that. Because that got a huge, the difference between a presumptive nominee as a matter of law, just enormous. And it'd be very difficult, short of death, which I'm not recommending, Donald Trump not to be the nominee now. It's just like he's locked in.
And just to say something everybody else has said, but you and I both have the receipts on this to take the moment to say it, which is, this is how parties are supposed to behave.
Right.
The way that parties are supposed to behave is to try to win elections. That's what parties are supposed to do. The purpose of a party is not to carry an ideology. The purpose of a party is not to be a cult of personality. The purpose of a party, it is a private entity, a corporation that exists for one purpose, which is to try to win elections. And Democrats want to win this election more than Republicans do. And they were willing to do a thing that was unpleasant and hard in order to do it. Republicans believe that the purpose of not all Republicans, many Republicans believe that the purpose of the Republican Party is to make them feel better. They want to feel better, and they think that the Republican Party's job is to make them feel better. And that is not the Republican Party's job. The Republican Party's job is to beat the Democratic Party.
All right, Brother Stirewalt, you've been generous with your time as always, and it was always good to have you here. We had remarkably less tomfoolery and hootenanny than we normally do, which I lament. But you have.
I'm very disappointed that we did not get to talk about 70s or 80s television. We did not get to talk about weird foods. We did not get to do whatever. But I will say that my eldest man-child, who I will not name here, but he did the most remarkable thing yesterday, which is a testament to the adolescent male's digestive system, which is he had a Reuben for breakfast. Nice. We were at a restaurant, and they had a Reuben on their lunch menu for breakfast. It was 8:30 in the morning, and he ordered and ate with relish, figuratively, a Reuben sandwich for breakfast. And my hat was off to him.
The Reuben sandwich is a great sandwich.
It's a great sandwich. One of the top 10.
Yeah, easily top 10, maybe top 5 sandwich.
It's an amazing sandwich. People are saying.
By the way, I'll tell you. Yeah, look, it's not Katz's. It's not Carnegie, may they rest in peace. But the Wegmans smoked brisket pastrami in the cold cut case,
really
satisfies your desire for it. That's all I'm saying.
Wow.
It tastes good. It is not, next level best thing I've ever had. But like, I've been stunned, and I've turned on a bunch of my guy friends about it, and all of them agree. Like, it is. When you want just some Swiss cheese and some pastrami, quick and dirty, it's really, it checks the box. You're not left thinking, why did I have that?
I stand by their corned beef. I'm willing to explore. And I will also tell you this very brief story. This summer, the boys and I were in New York City, and I consulted. Here's the third reference that will cause him to materialize. I consulted with John Podhoretz about whether to go to Katz or Second Avenue. Mm-hmm. And we went back and forth and concluded that Second Avenue was the correct location for my son's maiden voyage into Jewish delicatessen. So we're there. It's great. We're doing it, chomping pickles, the whole thing. And in a moment out of a movie, my younger man-child said aloud, "Can't we get cheese on any of these sandwiches?" And perfect. 5 people turned around, and I was like, "No, you may not have cheese on any of these sandwiches. You may not."
Yeah, that's one of the issues with the Reuben, right? It's
right.
Like, yeah, but
this is my people. This is my people culturally appropriating your people. That's what we're doing. We're culturally appropriating you to delicious ends.
I told you we're having people from the Dispatch over this week, and we've been discussing, debating what the menu should be. Civilly. In part because Jessica, whose food you have had,
quite so,
takes food seriously, and
yes,
and feels it is incumbent upon us to improve upon the menu that the Hayes offered at the last time. Steve and I go back and forth. And so,
how does Spanish wine pair with chicken wings, by the way? Well, is that a good?
I mean, what doesn't go well with chicken wings?
There you go. Exactly.
But we've been debating it, and at some point you need to try my wife's cherry Coke ribs. which is what we served last time. She makes this glaze by reducing cherry Coke and cherry Coke preserves. And cherry preserves.
Really?
Till it is the consistency of the tar they laid in Cool Hand Luke.
Nice.
And then you lacquer it onto the ribs, and it's really just. And I'm not a huge cherry guy, and there's some real cherries in there, but it is phenomenal.
I have done a similar thing with Dr. Pepper, but I am open to the cherry times cherry experience.
Yeah. But I think since we served that last time, we're thinking maybe a slow cook, a choice of. My wife makes these fantastic fish tacos from her time as an Alaskan with a limitless supply of halibut. And so we might do a slow cooked pork, choice of protein, slow cooked pork, pulled pork, or fish taco. Or
something for the mommy
fish,
party and something for the daddy party.
Exactly. And with that, my friend, lovely to see you. We'll have you back, obviously, if not before the convention, then certainly after. Certainly many times between now and Election Day, if Election Day ever actually arrives. So thank you, Brother Stirewalt.
Thank you, my friend.
Okay, so Brother Stirewalt has left the studio. I'll be honest, one of the reasons I want to have him in, I asked him late last night, and he was more than fine with doing it. We just had to do it early because he's a busy guy now. He's like this TV star over at News Nation. And I wanted to do it in part because I feel like this is just the times demand some punditry right now. And also because I want to get a bunch of shows in the can because I'm trying to figure out how much I can get on the road and disappear for a while. And we must keep the listeners of the Remnant sated at all costs. Obviously, I don't need to sort of belabor the point since it's sort of, as Chris alluded to, we have receipts on this going way, way back about strong parties and whatnot. But I do think like sort of the way to think about it, because it's this running theme of mine of late, is that for conservatives as a group, right? Obviously, there's massive overlap between the Venn diagrams, and these are archetypes, not actual descriptions of very many people. But I think one way to think about it is, as he was saying at the end about the job of parties is to win. For conservatives, principles are supposed to be more important than party. For partisans, the party is supposed to be more important than the principle. The nexus, right, of those two things where there are trade-offs between one and the other, like you don't want to break the principle, but maybe you bend it for the sake of winning. That's where healthy tension is supposed to lie lay in this intersection between sort of conservative movement and Republican Party. I think there's something very similar, obviously, with progressivism and the Democratic Party. The reason why I bring this up is that, as Chris and I were sort of getting at, is that the parties have become sort of their own form of identity in a way. They've become an ideological commitment unto themselves in the Trump era. And that old tension, which I want to be very clear, it ran through it was between various people, but it also runs through the human heart, right? These trade-offs about how far are you willing to go to support your party at the expense of your most cherished, principles and ideological commitments, and vice versa. How much are you willing to stick with your own ideological commitments at the expense of your party? And you can see at the testing point thing on issues like abortion, right? Because that's where it's very difficult to sort of really bend too much on your conviction. If you're a adamantly pro-life person, there's only so much give. And if you're an adamantly pro-choice person, there's only so much give. And but you can see it on all sorts of things. And that was, that gets back to sort of the Buckleyite position, which was back in the old days, was that conservatives should support the most conservative candidate electable, right? You don't want to make the sort of your principled commitments a suicide pact that you pick the most conservative candidate who even though because they're the most conservative candidate, they have no chance of winning. And I think that calculation has reached the point of diminishing returns a long time ago. It doesn't take into account other issues and factors about the importance of character, because I think people just sort of assumed that character, there's a certain baseline definition of character. But that's the sort of thing, what I mean about this tension or this divide or these trade-offs running through the human heart is you have to make that decision on the fly. And I now think that, like, for the Republican Party in general, that sort of algorithm is just sort of gone for a lot of people. I very much would like to get back to the point where the party people only care about winning, and the conservative movement people exert their influence over the party by saying, we're not going to participate and help you win unless you do X, Y, and Z, and have this sort of transactional kind of thing. It's sort of like my attitude about salesmen, right? It's not unique to me. You want your salesman at any sort of normal business to be as hungry and as incentivized as possible to maximize sales. They should be willing to do anything and everything, or not anything, but you know what I mean, constrained within certain limits, but they shouldn't be thinking about the larger brand, the larger enterprise, all that kind of stuff. They should just always be closing types, right? As long as they're ethical. And it's the job of people above them to be able to say no sometimes, right? That we're not going to do that just to add another point on the profit margins. That's sort of what you want from most political party hacks, is they just should be interested in winning. And then the people at the top and the people external to the party should be the ones to impose direction, limitation, all that kind of stuff. And again, varies for people in different positions, and it runs through the human heart too. But again, that kind of thinking, I think, is just sort of gone. And if Chris hadn't brought this stuff up at the hour and 5 minute mark, I would have brought it up with him there. But I want to get out of my head, in part because I've been thinking about David French's piece about endorsing or voting for Harris and all of that, where I have my disagreements with David. I also have my disagreements with his critics, and I'm thinking about writing about it. And anyway, it's in my head. So with that, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.
That's quite droll, old boy, but in fact, that you won't, because this is a podcast.
Golf clap.